What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Shane's Shelf. I am Shanen. Sorry if I'm looking a little bit more professional today. I kind of have a limited amount of my wardrobe with me since I'm kind of in a temporary situation. So the only piece of Ghanaian stuff I had were some of my ties. This is a kente tie made of kente cloth from Ghana. But today I'm going to be talking about the Door of No Return, which I read on a whim. This is not something I normally would read, but I was feeling kind of nostalgic for some Ghanaian stuff. So, for those unaware, and I would assume that'd be most of you, I haven't really shared that on this channel. I was a missionary in Ghana, the West African country of Ghana, for a couple of years. And that was 7 years ago, is when I got back, or so. I did it when I was 18. And I got 18, came back when I was 20. It was a good time. I loved it, actually, and recommend going to Ghana. Honestly, the people were super friendly, and I was kind of feeling like reading some Ghanaian literature. Now, I didn't look for super long. I was trying to find some stuff from relatively famous Ghanaian authors. Couldn't find it on Kindle or Audible and I just wanted something quick that I could grab for free or use a credit for Audible. And I ended up settling on this book, The Door of No Return by Kwame Alexander. And then I realized he's not actually Ghanaian. But the reason I thought he was initially was because his name is Kwame, and that is a Ghanaian name. And I'll give you my Ghanaian name if you're interested. If you're Ghanaian and you're watching this, Akwaba. And if you're not, then that just means welcome, pretty much. Uh, I was actually I was relatively conversational in Chui when I lived there because I was there for a while, and I've forgotten most of it. But there are some words that are pretty easy to remember. It actually isn't really, all things considered, a very difficult language to learn. But something you can do really easily is give yourself a Ghanaian name because they do it based off the days of the week, and there's usually something else added to it. And they always have a tribal name or a local name, as they always called it when I was there, and a Christian name is what, like, so my name's Shanen, that would be my Christian name, but then my local name would be Kweku. Kweku means I was born on Wednesday. And more specifically, I would tell people, I would introduce myself this way to some people because they really enjoyed the white guy having, caring about their stuff. And that was Kweku Ata. And Kweku means I was born on Wednesday. Ata means I'm a twin, and it means I'm the younger twin. So my brother, if he had been there, which he wasn't, he would have been Kweku Pine, the older twin. Uh, Regardless, when I said that, they automatically knew I was born on Wednesday, and they automatically knew, oh, I was a twin, and they usually ask me where my brother was, and I was like, oh, he's not here. But regardless, very, very welcoming culture. This book, I will say simply, I would recommend it. It's written for a younger audience, incredibly fast read. I think it's written for like kids around the age of 10 or something, and simply put, I would recommend it. I think I would have enjoyed it, having it as an option when I was that age. And it's always good to be get acquainted with some other cultures, even if relatively on a surface level. And he did a lot of that. So the guy has a Ghanaian name. I couldn't find too much information about him, even on his own website, because I was curious. My assumption is that his parents, because he was born in Manhattan, is that his parents are some sort of black nationalist or perhaps Pan-Africanist, and he was born in the 60s, and he was born 2 years just after Ghanaian's first president was ousted. And that guy's name was Kwame Nkrumah. Very famous. He was the first Ghanaian prime minister and the first Ghanaian president right after when they got their independence from Great Britain. And so I spoke English when I was there, just so you're aware, because they speak English. As long as they went to school, they speak English. It was very interesting. One question I have is, how fictional should historical fiction be? Because most of it was okay. There was one thing that I think, okay, this is kind of egregious in many ways, and I'll get to that. But as far as the cultural stuff goes, you could tell he spent time there. I found in an interview he's been to Ghana 11 times. Didn't say how long he spent there. I've been to Ghana once, but I was there for 2 years, so I was there for a while. I had a very nice tan, very nice farmer's tan by the time I came back because I was outside just talking to people every day. In fact, to be completely honest, I mean, I'm talking to a camera right now, but I'm pretty comfortable talking to random people, and it's mostly because of this experience I had in Ghana. Before I left, I was so incredibly abysmally shy. I could not talk to people. I got away most of my life always having someone to talk to because I always went somewhere with my twin brother and we would talk to each other. But I was so shy. I could hardly talk to people, especially not girls. Spoiler, but I am married now, so we took care of that. But you will get a good idea of some things. The food that he mentions is, yeah, definitely Ghanaian food. Owari, the game that he mentions, is a game that a lot of people play. You will see played if you're just walking around Ghana. I will mention I only lived in really the southeast portion of Ghana. uh, my mission boundaries covers mostly just the southeast portion. There were four missions when I was there. I think there's about five now, and so we're just consigned to the mission boundaries. We get assigned to different places. I don't choose where I'm going. I lived in the capital region of Greater Accra, and I actually lived in Accra. Uh, he mentions the place I lived, Osu. Uh, I lived there for a couple months initially. I moved over to Tima, and then I went to Eastern region. And lived in Nujwa Ben, and then I lived in Lower Manya Krobo a tiny bit, and I lived in Yilo Krobo, and those are all even on the eastern side of Eastern region. And just I want to say that in many ways because my first two areas when I lived in Greater Accra region were Ga territory. That was the tribe that is from there, and then Nujwa Ben was Akan territory. This is Asante territory. And this story is about an Asante character. And Lower Manya Krobo, though, they're on the Volta River. So that was more Dongbe, and they're kind of like, I guess you could say cousins pretty much to the Gas. They speak a more similar language. And this story is about a fictional character in the Ashanti Kingdom, which the Ashanti Kingdom did exist. So Britain controlled what they called the Gold Coast, which was mostly the coastal region of what is today Ghana, starting in 1821 when they bought a lot of stuff off the Dutch and the Danish, which I feel like people are confused. I was a little confused when I first initially learned that the Danish lived there. Christianborg is the name of the area I actually lived in around Osu, and that's named from the Danes. And then 1821, Britain bought all that land, and it pretty much became the Gold Coast. But just north of them, and a huge chunk of what is in present day Ghana, was the Ashanti Kingdom. And they had like 5 wars with the Ashantis, and the Ashantis kind of kicked their butts the first couple of times, which is weird to think about. That didn't happen a lot in British history. In fact, the 1821 Britain gets the Gold Coast completely under their control, essentially. But then the Ashanti Kingdom, they don't annex until like 1902. So it took them a good 80 years or so, and they won I don't know how the third war went exactly, but I'm pretty sure Britain won the fourth and fifth war, and it was after that fifth war that they take the territory. And so it was weird. It was interesting, actually. I thought this would be super interesting. Now, on the map, he puts Lake Volta on the map. Lake Volta did not exist for about 100 years after the story takes place. He said it took place in 1860. And that's my perhaps real big hiccup. We'll get to that. But Lake Volta did not exist. Oh well, he didn't really go to it. Anyway, we utilized it. He just showed it on his little map. And then the Brits were in Ghana and they controlled the Gold Coast in 1860, but they did not practice slavery, which is a big part of his story. And I thought that was odd. I felt like it needs to be historically accurate, and that's a huge thing to get wrong. Now, obviously, the whole underlying problem and egregious character of slavery is still accurate. It's just the time frame is wrong. And my thought was like, it's like writing The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, but he says it takes place in 1885, and it's like, excuse me, the story just doesn't make sense. Now, most of the Americans are going to be his readers. They might not realize that. But in 1860, there is no slavery in the Gold Coast. In fact, the Ashanti Kingdom would be practicing slavery still. That doesn't end until Britain takes control and forces them to end it. So the Ashantis practice slavery. He does not show the Ashantis practicing slavery. He just shows the Brits doing it. But while this would have been more accurate if it had taken place like 100 years earlier, because the Ashanti Kingdom was still around in 1760. The Brits did not control the Gold Coast completely, but they did have territory in the Gold Coast still, and that would have made more sense. I don't know why he did that. In fact, my assumption is he did it because 1860s was kind of a big slavery year if you're an American. 1860 is when the Civil War starts, so kind of a big to do. That is my assumption. I hope he didn't do it. I don't know. I still feel like it seems kind of silly. I don't really know why he did that. If that's the reason, I don't think that's a good enough reason. But let me know if you think because my understanding of historical fiction is that it's just to be historically accurate for the period. Now there are some other things that weren't quite, but those were pretty minor. Just like the slang chale he used, that is definitely not around in 1860, and he was using it, which that doesn't really bother me too much. It was just I'm aware of it. And his one of his points was, which I thought was interesting, his school teacher, which I don't really know if they had school traditional like British schools in the Ashanti Kingdom in 1860 when they were not controlled by the British. They may have had some from missionary work, but I'm not certain. But his teacher was an Asante like him. Sorry if you hear me. Asante is how they say it, and Ashanti is pretty much the anglicized version of saying it. He was saying his professor went to Accra, where I lived, the capital, to go to. He went to a British school there, and then he came back, and he's like forcing Kofi, which means he was born on Friday, Kofi Ofin, to learn the Queen, like the Queen's English. And I was like, well, that'd be kind of odd because in 1860 the Ashanti Kingdom wasn't controlled by Britain. Why would a teacher be like that? I mean, I could see it happening though. So the guy's like, oh, I would need to be civilized by the English, and they taught me to be civilized. I'm gonna help these other ones. I could definitely still see that being a problem, and being that way, it just seemed kind of odd why it was happening at a school in the Ashanti Kingdom. It was not part of the Gold Coast. In fact, that's the schools are still like that today. Like that's pretty much if you don't speak English, you didn't go to school, and they make sure that students teach English. But he was treating it like, and this is fair, he's treating it like the British were a dominant cultural force that were taking away their language and forcing them to speak English. Now everyone speaks English in Ghana. It's a lingua franca, but I would really say there's two lingua francas in Ghana: English and Twi. And Twi is the language of the Asante, and not everybody's Asante. So it's just like in that same regard, the Ashantis could be having that cultural dominance. That he makes this character Asante who's angry at the British for pretty much taking their power because the Asantes were the slavers and they were the very wealthy and powerful kingdom, and they still were. I mean, hence they gave the Brits some trouble. But I don't know. It feels like I don't feel as bad because it's the Ashantis. The Ashantis were the ones actually practicing slavery in the 1860s, and they are the dominant culture today. I lived in Accra. People still need to know Twi in Accra because Twi is the language to know if you want to do trade and commerce, even though it's Ga territory, so they should be speaking Ga, and they did do that as well. But I just thought like his commentary like that he was trying to get like this political commentary was just had some holes in it, which I think honestly could have been mostly fixed by putting it in 1760 instead of 1860. And then the other thing was maybe not making him an Ashanti, maybe making him Fanti, which is they also speak an Akan language. They both speak Twi actually. The Fanti were in part of the Gold Coast. They're further south. They're on the coast, the south central coast of Ghana is Fanti territory. That would have made more sense. I think those two things, especially the first one, maybe those don't matter that much. It was very very noticeable to me, but I know the stuff. Uh, Let me know if you think it really matters. Overall, I would say you're gonna get a general idea without info dumping you. You're gonna get a general idea of some of the cultural terms and norms of Ghanaians today, and I think that could be valuable. There was one other thing that was pretty minute, but it made me think I actually don't know how long this guy spent here, or maybe he just never went to proper Ga territory and was out on the streets with them necessarily. But that was his cousin or whatever for the character was like, oh, eat your kinke like a proper Asante boy. And my immediate thought was kinke is not an Asante food. I mean, there's different tribal foods, and there are foods that are like pan-Ghanaian at this point, right? And kinke is probably one of those, but anyone in Ghana could tell you it's not Asante. There are two types of kinke in Ghana. One is Ga kinke, which they wrap in corn husk, and one is Fanti kinke, which they wrap in banana leaves. And maybe serving in Ga territory like right when I got there, and they were pretty proud of that. Like, this is a Ga food, yeah. We don't eat that fufu akan stuff. This is Ga, strong kinke with pepe, and He was like, but his character was like, yeah, his character shouldn't would have known that, and I feel like the author should have known that too. And if anything, I'm like, how much time did he spend in Ghana? And I don't think he at least had a Ghanaian proofread this, because any Ghanaian could have also told him that. So this was weird. If anything, it almost feels like me trying to write a story about Ireland. I can learn about Ireland even if I had gone to Ireland a couple of times. And then you see my name, Shannon or Shanine, on it. So it's like, oh, he's got an Irish first name at least, given name. He might know what he's talking about and might be deceived at first. But I don't know. It almost feels like he's not Ghanaian, and he isn't. He's an American just like me. But his understanding is almost superficial, but superficial, mostly effective. There was just some things, a couple things in that one cultural thing that I feel like should have been pointed out to him. And again, were there no Ghanaians available to proofread? So that seemed a little weird to me. But either way, Ghana is a beautiful country. Ghanaians are wonderful people. I've never been treated so well, so consistently in my life. I mean, I stood out like a sore thumb pretty much my whole time there because I was a white guy. Uh, but people were super kind. And that's one thing I can point out too, is that even though he got this political history wrong of the country, or he just was lying about it, or putting it, distorting it on purpose, I don't know. Ghanaians don't feel animosity towards the Akans or towards the Asantis specifically. Uh, it's fine. They're all Ghanaian brothers and sisters. And I mean, they don't feel that towards the Asante. They don't even feel that towards the British. I can tell you on like one hand count how many times people were angry at me for being a white guy. Most everybody was like, "Oh yeah, the Brits, they were great," pretty much. And they've had their independence since the 50s, so most people weren't alive during the Brits. Most of the younger generation weren't that I talked to. But certainly no animosity, and I think that's something good, something great the Ghanaians were about. They were super welcoming, super hospitable, excellent, excellent people. If I had money, I would love to go to Ghana again. Although I probably wouldn't stay for 2 years this time. But either way, if you want to be acquainted with such people, you can ignore my ramblings that you would probably not have noticed if you were reading it. It's just, if anything, maybe I regret reading it in the sense of I felt like I was reading it as a critique when I realized he wasn't actually Ghanaian, to see what he got wrong, and I don't know if that was perhaps the most appropriate thing to do. But regardless, still enjoyable story, still sad. It still will give you the idea of the atrocities, sorry, of the transatlantic slave trade, and it's a really quick read. Uh, even even if you don't like it for some reason, it's really fast. So, either way, I will see you guys next time. Hopefully, my ramblings didn't take forever. This has gone longer than I had anticipated, but hopefully that wasn't too bad for you guys. Let me know your thoughts. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and comment, especially with the idea of like how accurate, how fictional, or how should historical fiction be? Uh, because yeah, I've already given you my thoughts. You have a good one.